Hey, have you ever found yourself scrolling through endless gaming PC listings, feeling that knot in your stomach because you can't tell if the next box will actually deliver the smooth frame rates you need or just sit gathering dust? I was in the exact same spot a few weeks ago, trying to decide whether a pre-built rig was worth the cash when I could have saved a bundle by building my own. I dug into the specs, read the handful of reviews, and even watched a few YouTubers break them down, because dropping a few $100s on the wrong machine feels like a gamble. If you're on the fence, stick around. The link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's talk about the Skytech gaming PC Rampage, the black edition that ships with an Intel Core i7-14700F and an AMD Radeon RX 9070 XT, paired with 32GB of DDR5 RAM and a 1TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD. That mouthful of numbers looks impressive on paper, but the real question is, does it hold up when you fire it up for a 2-hour gaming session, a day of streaming, or a weekend of content creation? The short answer, for most mid-range enthusiasts who want a ready-to-play machine without tinkering, it does a solid job, though there are a few trade-offs you should be aware of before you click Add to Cart. First, the CPU. The i7-14700F is a 14-core, 20-thread beast that can push up to 5.3 GHz in turbo. In practice, that means you'll see crisp, responsive performance in CPU-heavy titles like Civilization VI or Microsoft Flight Simulator. I ran a quick benchmark on a similar setup and saw stable 60+ FPS at 1080p with high settings, and even 1440p in many games. The takeaway? If you're the type who likes to leave a few background applications running while you game Discord, OBS, perhaps a Twitch stream, this CPU can keep everything humming without choking. The downside is that the F suffix means it lacks integrated graphics, which isn't a problem for a dedicated GPU but does remove a safety net if the GPU ever fails before you can replace it. Speaking of the GPU, the Radeon RX 9070 XT with 16GB of GDDR6 is positioned as a step up from the 9000 series, targeting 1080p ultra settings and decent 1440p performance. In real-world testing, you'll get solid 60 frames per second runs in titles like Fortnite, Apex Legends, and even newer releases like Cyberpunk 2077 on medium to high presets. The extra VRAM shines when you load large texture packs or modded content. Think Bethesda games with high-resolution mods, so you won't hit a wall as quickly as you would with a 8GB card. However, if your plan is to push 4K gaming or dive into heavy ray tracing workloads, you'll start seeing the limitations. The 9070 XT does handle ray tracing, but you'll need to dial down settings to keep frame rates playable. Now let's talk storage and memory. A 1TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD is not just a buzzword, it translates to near-instant load times. I installed Windows, the Steam client, and a handful of large games, and the difference between launching a title from a HDD versus this SSD was night and day. Think 15 seconds versus under 5 seconds for load screens. The 32GB of DDR5 RAM means you have ample headroom for multitasking, mod-heavy games, and even basic video editing. If you're the sort of gamer who keeps a dozen tabs open while you game, this memory amount prevents any slowdowns. The only gripe is that the RAM runs at 4800 MHz, which is a nice speed, but the motherboard is a basic B660 chipset that won't let you overclock the memory. Most users won't notice this, but hardcore overclockers might feel left out. One of the subtle aspects that often gets missed is the networking. The PC includes 802.11 AC Wi-Fi, which is fine for most broadband connections, but if you're on a gigabit fiber plan and want the fastest wireless experience, you may need to add a separate Wi-Fi 6 adapter or simply use a wired Ethernet connection. I found the built-in Ethernet port works without any driver hassle, so plugging the rig directly into your router gave me stable, low-latency gaming sessions. If you're planning to keep the machine in a bedroom or gaming den without easy cable runs, you'll probably want to invest in a higher-end Wi-Fi card, especially if you're playing fast-paced shooters where every millisecond counts. Design-wise, the Black Edition Rampage has a sleek, matte chassis with a front mesh that lets the fans breathe. The airflow is decent to 120mm front intake fans and a rear exhaust, so under load, the system stays around 70 C on the CPU, which is comfortable. However, because the case is fairly compact, there isn't a lot of room for future upgrades. If you ever want to swap the GPU for a higher-end model, you may need to check clearance and power requirements. The power supply is a 600W unit, which is sufficient for the current components but offers minimal headroom for a big jump to a 3080 class card. In short, the system is well balanced for its current spec sheet but isn't a long-term